I think the season as a whole might have gotten to Caitlin Clark following the loss to the Seattle Storm because she was perhaps at her most frustrated in the post-game press conference. I already did a video on the demand to ask Aaliyah Boston a question after she was just sitting up there for minutes getting all the questions, and Boston is on her phone because no one is asking her anything. But Caitlin Clark was also asked if any veterans or what the best advice any veteran has given her so far this season.
Us too.
And what's the best advice that Vet has given you in game this season?
Nobody gives me advice in the game. I wish. Us too.
So that little I wish is going to be the thing that is blown up and discussed and talked about. Now, again, she was responding to a specific question about whether, vets give her advice in game. And of course, that would eliminate, let's say, Aaliyah Boston, who has given Clark advice in game. We've seen that, right? We've seen Aaliyah Boston walking off the court with Caitlin Clark giving her advice in the past. But Aaliyah was a rookie last year. She was just a rookie a season ago. Here's the footage from earlier this year where you see Aaliyah Boston talking to Clark on the way off the floor. Right here. So some advice from Aaliyah. And of course, Caitlin, I think it was responding to the question at hand, and the other vets would mean vets on other teams, perhaps, somebody taking a new star under their wing and saying, here's how you get ready for the league. Now, she is getting advice from her coach. Some are going to take that as a slight at Christy Sides, some frustration at Christy Sides. And it might be. I'm not saying that isn't that boiling over and her being upset, at the coach. But Christy Sides did say that Clark needs to shoot the ball more again after the game. That's been a consistent theme from Sides, but she does it publicly every time. You always see her give that advice very publicly. Whatever she's doing, however she's deciding to coach Caitlin Clark, including after that game. Here was the Fever coach on Clark shooting more.
Post game, Caitlin says something about I need to do a better job hunting my shot. Do you want her to shoot more? Do you feel like she's not taking enough shots?
Yeah, Caitlin Clark needs to shoot at minimum 15 shots a game for us. I mean, she's got to get shots. We've got to do a better job of setting her up and setting some really good screens for her to get her open. The way people guard her, it's tough because she's getting redded. So once the ball's out of her hands, she's setting the rest of our team up for some really great looks. But when we're not able to finish those, we've got to make sure we're going back and trying to get her back to that ball, getting that ball back in her hands at times.
Do you want her to be able to be setting screens for her to come up instead of just ball screens? Like for her to just come up, shoot, catch. Like she didn't do that a lot in college. She always had the ball in her hands.
Yeah, I mean, the way teams play her, I mean, if she gets a ball screen, they're just going to do everything to take it out of her hands. They're going to red her. I mean, that's what she's getting every time. She's getting some pretty good looks when she's off the ball, but we like her on the ball, so we just got to figure out how to manage the two.
That's actually not a bad answer from Christy Sides, who has deserved plenty of the criticism she's gotten, right? Plenty of it is deserved. That's not a bad answer from Christy Sides, who is essentially saying, Caitlin Clark is doing everything she can. She's getting extra attention. Her teammates got to help her out. They got to finish the plays when she's assisting to them on these brilliant assists. At the same time, we need her to be aggressive, right? And when the Steph Curry comparisons come up, there's on ball and off ball. And when you see Erica Wheeler come into the game, I think some of the time that is to try to mix up the looks. Obviously, Caitlin can't handle the ball every possession, every single game. That's going to wear you out. And also she's seeing that extra attention. And when it's a team like Seattle, who's really good and really long and athletic, and that's the biggest problem the Indiana Fever have, is they just lack in team athleticism and bounce on the perimeter, right? And therefore, when you face these teams that are Connecticut Sun or Aces, Liberty, Storm, the good teams in the league, it's apparent versus when they're facing the teams that are more on their level, the Sky, the Sparks, the Mystics, those squads. And you see it with Seattle, and Seattle wanted to take away Caitlin Clark. But Steph Curry, throughout his career, if you watched him, he does a lot on the ball, obviously, and pull up into those threes. And we saw Clark hit logo threes and all that in the game against the Storm. I mean, I actually think Caitlin played a pretty good all-around game. Couple of bad turnovers in that one, which she needs to curtail, like when she's forcing it versus when she's using her, gifts, if you will. And that'll come with time. I also think, you want to see her do more of the floater kind of game that we saw in this one, where she split the defense and was able to score with the floater, versus the air ball that was seen earlier this year. I think you want to see more of that from Caitlin Clark. But with Steph Curry, he has the ball and he's creating a lot for Golden State. But then they also run a lot of action for him off ball, and he's constantly in motion. That's the thing that's I coach little kids, right? And what I try to tell them about moving without the ball, I use Steph Curry as an example because he's constantly in motion without the ball, which makes him impossible to check and deal with, because when he's got the ball, you got to be all over him. And when he doesn't have the ball, you got to be all over him. And that's something Caitlin Clark and the Fever can eventually get to, because you don't want to take the ball out of her hands, given how gifted she is as a playmaker, right? Like, you want to maximize that. At the same time, you have to show the defense other looks. You have to give her a chance to get open without having to work so hard for it every single time. And that's where the off-the-ball stuff would come into play. And the Fever as a whole just need to play with more force and more energy in order to get Caitlin those open looks so that she can take advantage of that. And then she has to learn to adapt to the various play styles. And again, come all the way around, catch off the screen, whop, off the three, and then mix it up with the dribble drive action. So obviously Caitlin was frustrated following that game. You understand why. And I understand the frustration with Christy's sides. Like, I didn't understand why she brought Temi Fagbenle in the game and she took Caitlin Clark out. That didn't make any sense to me from a rotation standpoint. But that specific answer from sides actually made a lot of sense if we're not being biased about it. That answer made a lot of sense.